I told them I said it. You should come out in the room. Let's get started up here.
Welcome to the launch of Solidarity John Bars with Asaf, Rashid, and Jordan House and thank you for coming. I'm Fazila. I work for Fernwood Publishing. I was very privileged to be the editor of this amazing book. I learned a lot. And there's a Metallica quote at the end. Is it supposed to be Metallica?
It's Metallica.
It's Metallica. It's stated. Okay. Thank you so much for being here again, and
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. This is amazing to see an amazing crowd here in Halifax for this event. We got a good show for you tonight. I'm going to start off with Al in conversation with a couple of other justice folks. As well as Ottawa, and Patricia and Rachel, and I was going to begin a conversation with them that will take us this event. Then we're going to go over to me. I'll have some remarks to make, and then Jordan, and off to Jason Evans here. Fantastic. Halifax Workers Action Centre. Fighting for workers' justice, or otherwise it would be none. So we'll go that way. So I'll
yeah, you
Do you want to just like swap?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. I'm like checking up in the computer to make sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to this important event, which is the first book on prison labor organizing in Canada, and maybe in North America. I don't know if this number one, but certainly dealing with the Canadian context, which is the extremely important contribution both to the prison justice movement and the labor movement. And part of tonight is talking about how and why that's connected. Many of you helped us during the struggle in 2018 in the Burnside prison strike. I'm sure many of you remember that, which was a really momentous occasion in this province, where prisoners in Burnside held a 3-week labor strike and withdrew their services from the prison in order to fight for prison justice. And during that struggle, there was a lot of external support from unions, from people across the like religious organizations. But we had all kinds of people that joined that strike and that showed us the possibilities for this kind of solidarity. But I'm really honored today. The way that things work out, we have two of the most amazing prison organizers and activists in Canada that are here. Particularly Rachel is in town for a very wonderful event. So I thought we had to take this opportunity to hear from them and all their work. So sitting beside me is Rachel Fayter. Rachel is a PhD student at the University of Ottawa. She'll talk about her work more, but her work is really important in that it intervenes into the images, the stereotypes we have around incarcerated women, and encourages us to see models of resilience and not women in prison who are just seen as like beaten down victims. And she draws on her own lived experience to do that work. She's not only doing academic work, she's also actively, while she does academic study, she is also working with CASE. She's doing organizing with women and women inside across the country as well. So just to have her here and hear from that brilliant work and expertise, such an opportunity. And beside her is Patricia Whyte, who I hope some of you know. Patricia is a long-term worker with CASE, and she's now working with Path Legal Clinic. She's the first Indigenous advocate, believe it or not, in this entire Atlantic region for Indigenous women and incarcerated women. So she does advocacy on the inside. She also has lived experience, and she's been putting that experience to all kind, he worked with Coverdale, like housing women, she's done work with unhoused women, trans and non-binary people, real on the ground work as well. So these are two absolutely brilliant and amazing advocates who contribute so much to the movement, are really teaching us how to do our work. So when you read our books, we're learning because of people that contribute on the inside. So that's for me. I'm so happy to introduce you. So I kind of gave a summary, but I'll go this way. Rachel, can you maybe tell us a bit about the movement? And particularly the theme for the night is solidarity with the inside. So organizing on the inside. You write a lot about the resilience movement. So maybe you could just tell us a bit about your work.
Yeah, so thank you for the lovely introduction, and I'm honored to be here. So I spent about 4 years at Grand Valley Institution in Kitchener, and it was a very difficult, traumatic experience, obviously, and I couldn't have gotten through it without the solidarity, the caring community of the other people inside. Because the system, it's very isolating, and it separates us from not only the community, but from one another. There are institutional rules that don't allow us to share food. We can't share coffee or clothing or music or anything. We get charges, thrown in segregation for helping one another. So we do that work kind of on the underground, sneakily, I've had people hiding in my closet just to come over for dinner, for instance. The work that I do now out in the community is based on the experiences that I had inside, because I saw so much injustice and isolation, but at the same time, I saw so much strength in the women that were incarcerated there. There's so many exceptional people that are exceptional writers, artists, cooks, just generally good people who have been oppressed and have faced so many barriers to be able to be included in. So when I was released, I went to the University of Ottawa. I was lucky enough to find a supervisor because of my connection with a prison education program called Walls to Bridges. And that program brings education for free into prisons across Canada. And prisoners actually work together to train professors on how to teach in a prison setting. And then the prisoners will get university credits that are free, and then they can continue their education on the outside. So from that basis, I got out and I have connections with people inside and people that are outside with lived experience. And I do all kinds of different solidarity work, whether it's with CAFEs like Elizabeth Pride National, trying to do systems change work, or mutual aid programs and peer support. Right now, I'm involved with my Walls to Bridges colleagues. We're setting up a program to help. It's going to be called Landing Spot, and it's just in the initial stages. But the purpose of it is to help people, whether it's not just women, men, youth, anyone that's getting released from provincial or federal prisons during the first 6 months, because that's the most difficult time. And we're doing an apprenticeship program in digital media. So people will be trained and paid so that they can learn how to do this work and help them find a job after. So that's just one example of something that I'm working on, but I'm constantly doing talks and meeting people and trying to engage with the community just to shift the perception. There's, as Al mentioned, lots of times we're viewed as victims, but we're also viewed as monsters or not good mothers or not good people, all these negative stereotypes. And I just want to show the world that we have a lot to offer. And if people will allow us to and stop doing the criminal record checks for everything, allow us to find housing, allow us to find employment, then we can work together to change the world and make it a better place.
Rashid,
it's funny because many of you probably are familiar with Emma Halpern. That's how I got into. I know Emma's really big. I first met Emma when I was at Nova. I did both in Edmonton and Nova, and they have these NMT meetings every month with the inmates and the higher management and all of the enterprise come to see if we can like resolve our issues. So coming from Edmonton, I had a lot more smarter, I guess, like, I just knew a lot more. So I asked them what was happening with our pop cans that we were purchasing at Canteen, because we knew that they were going and they were being, recycled. And they said, well, they're going to the Guards Fund so they can have their barbecues. I'm like, so our money that we buy from Canteen is going to your guys' fund. Like, no one understood that, like, they just didn't click into that. So that was the first time I met Emma, and then I was like, who is this little woman staring at me like this? Once I got released from Forestford, I connected, and then, started doing talks, and as Elle had said about the first Indigenous peer support worker, I think people forget this is what happens to us. I got released in the Section 84, if anybody's familiar with that. The Mi'kmaq Friendship Center is considered the 13th reserve here. So if anybody's from the West or the reserve isn't close, they will support your release while you stay in a halfway house. So with that being said, they released you to a white parole officer, white halfway house staff, a white program facilitator, white everything. You don't have that connection. So when we built this position of the peer support worker, I was that bridge. So to help them with their culture. This is why Indigenous women want to stay inside. They have their elders, they have their sweat, they have their medicine. So for myself, I can advocate for myself. Of course, I got a big mouth and can talk. But what about the women that can't? What happens to them? They slip through the cracks again. This is why you look at the statistics. They stay until their statutory release and would rather go home because they don't want to go to a halfway house where it's all white to everything. And that's just the truth. And I'm sure, African associates can say the same. Like, it's where are they? Where's our work at? So I feel like once we can get to that point where we have, regular people, like, I think it's important to remember that everybody's an individual. We all have different paths. We all have different issues. We're not lumped into one. We're not defined by our CSC paperwork. We're not defined by, this is what people with lived experience looks like. That's what I'll say right there. People that are going for their PhD, people who work for law firms, people who advocate for the rights of not just people of color, but people. And I think that's very important for everybody to share. Yeah.
So the book is largely about labor organizing. People have to work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like
So
25%.
I'm sure it would shock you. Exactly. So can you tell people a bit about like what the working
Yeah.
conditions are like in prison, the pay?
You only get certain options. So I was a program assistant where I helped set up games and bingo nights and whatever. And then there's like a horticulture assistant, or you have to work at the factory where you make like rugs and carpets, and but I don't even know what it is. It's not even $1 an hour though. It's like little nothing. I don't even know what it is now.
There's a pay scale, right? So you start,
Right.
there is like level A, B, C, D, and you start up, everybody starts off at level C, which is $5.80 a day. Now, and then the highest you can make is $6.80 a day, or some people get only $2 for full-time work. Now, 55% of that is cut off. So prisoners actually have to pay for room and board,
Yeah.
telephone costs,
Cable.
cable calls, and then also that money has to go to our canteen
Or
to be able to buy the phone cards, to buy stamps, envelopes, pens, papers, to be able to communicate with people, to buy our hygiene items, shampoo, toothpaste. So if you don't have somebody in the community to give you money, you're extremely broke. It's basically slave.
It really is. And they know they have you. And what else are you gonna do? What else are you gonna do? If you have no money, you're gonna work for that $5, whatever that's flashed in that. And every 2 weeks or whatever, when you get paid, we're only allowed to put our phone money on once per month. So if we miss that, we don't have enough money, then we don't have any phone calls for 1 month.
And the jobs inside the prisons designated for women are highly gendered.
Right.
So the factory that Patricia was referring to is called Forcan.
Yeah.
And that is actually a for-profit factory, right? So Corrections Canada is making money off of our slave labor. And in the women's
They're making
institutions,
big money.
yeah.
Big
in the
money.
women's institutions, it's all textiles, so it's sewing. So the men's institutions, they learn skills in construction, and trade, and mechanics, things like that. But not the women. We have jobs like cooking and gardening and cleaning, sewing, those types of things.
Or we can choose to go to school and get paid way less.
Yeah.
And don't you also make underwear and stuff like the men's?
Yeah, you had to make uniforms and things. And the other thing is that basically the prisoners run the institution. So the only thing we don't do is the security part, right? But we're the ones maintaining all the grounds, doing the maintenance in the house, doing the cooking, the food services, serving
Right,
groceries, the
Literally
recycling, the
everything.
compost, the gardening, the cleaning guards' offices, literally everything.
It has
So
to be like on a minimum scale to be able to do like healthcare offices or like the warden's office. If you were to take the warden's office, who had, you're like real privileged. You're real privileged.
And if prisoners decide to stop working, which we often do on Prisoners Justice Day, which is
Absolutely.
August 10th every year, then everything is shut down. And in terms of labor organizing, I actually organized a strike once when I was working at Food Services, because the institution, they frame so many job positions, like Patricia was talking about beginning the warden's office. Many of the positions, like working in the library, the canteen, food service, they're considered positions of trust. So if you have institutional charges, then that means you can lose your job. There were many times, yeah, where I couldn't work for 6 months, just for some
And
stupid
let's
charge.
talk about why that happens though, Rachel. So we can have someone, like a fellow peer of us, that do not, like, we have an issue with. They can go to the guards and say something, and that goes right in our paperwork, it's not factual, and we still get punished for it.
A reliable
It's
source,
because
yeah.
It's a reliable source,
Yeah.
because that reliable source has never had an institutional charge.
Yeah.
So that's how it goes, and I'll never forget the time when the CM, which is the head of all the guards, said to me, Patricia, why do you only hang out with Indigenous women? You guys all wear all black and gray, you guys in the game? And I'm like, what the fuck? So I went to my elder, and my elder had explained to him to understand like that Indigenous women only understand each other's trauma and intergenerational trauma. And years ago, that's how women gathered in sweat lodges and together. Like, how disrespectful can you be for you to just assume that and say, don't say that to the white girl that, you know, running dope in here, like you go say nothing to her, you know, it's all people of color that they attack. And it's like a rat race, and then, oh, you're angry because I keep poking at you, need a program for that. And don't forget that we have to do program Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day on top of our work for us to even get out to parole.
What happens when, like, so just a last question, because I know we want to get past it. You both have experiences of organizing inside while you're inside, and now organizing from the outside world. So what kind of, maybe a couple of lessons you could give us, like, what did you learn organizing inside, and like, what do you carry forward now?
Well, stick together and walk against me. You gotta stick together, because if you don't, I'm telling you, you have to stick with your fellow peers, because like, you're the only ones that know what you're truly going through. You have to stick together, and it's the same as the outside, stick together, and that, you know, that power dynamic of always trying to put rules and disgusting rules out of it, run our lives and do not stick together. That would be my lesson.
That's true. We're absolutely stronger together. But one lesson I learned is CSC has so much power over people's lives when you're incarcerated and when you're on parole.
Walk on water, you know.
And it can be very damaging for people inside to organize. So there was a time where we did a peaceful protest, and under the commissioner's directives, along with Canadian law, peaceful protests are supposed to be allowed to happen. So we were protesting because I believe it was an Indigenous woman that was being put in segregation for absolutely no reason. So we had about 50 of us that sat in the middle of the yard, and we refused to walk up, and we said, you have to let her out of SEG. All of us got charged for that, institutional charges. So when that happens, we get fined sometimes, which is like a week's wages.
Yeah.
So imagine like $20 for us is like $1,000 for someone in the community, right? Or some of us got thrown in segregation. We had our cells tossed, we had things taken, there was use of force, that kind of thing. And on the outside, I mean, we can be protected a little bit more. But the thing about advocacy and organizing is you always need to ask the prisoners, the people who are most impacted by it, what they need and want, and make sure that they are safe. Because sometimes there's activists that would come into the prison and they would see injustice happening, say for a Walls to Bridges class where there's professors, and they see the way the prisoners are treated, and they want to do something. They want to go talk to the warden. They want to challenge this. And sometimes as prisoners, we have to say, no, please don't do that, because the risk of us getting punished and losing this important program that's valuable to us. So it is very important, but you have to be very sensitive to the harm that it can cause. Yeah, by the system.
Thank you for letting, I'm so sorry for the children if I curse.
Where can you find both of your work? Or like,
Yeah, so I'm with Pat Bingle here in Dartmouth, that's Lovely Fry, so you can find me.
like if people want speakers or?
Yeah, I have some cards, so come up to me and I'll give them up to you.
Yeah, and I have a website actually where I've published lots about my experiences and my work. So if I can give you my name, but if you Google Rachel Fayter, it'll easily come up. I've also done interviews on CBC, ideas, things like that. So, I mean,
I'm super honored that you guys allowed us to speak.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I respect. So
thank you. Thanks for having us. It's an honor.
Great help, thank you.
All right, well, I don't know how to follow
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, just follow it, see it.
Buy
the book and.
Yeah, and have a good night. Actually, no, we have a few things to say. So basically, just to begin, like everyone wants to kind of know how the hell did we get going on this? So actually, back at 10 years ago now, it was 10 years ago, where I had a radio show on CHSR in Burlington, the campus community station out there. And the show was called From the Margins. It was all about social justice, about workers' rights, about people just fighting for a better society, basically. And I knew my good friend Jordan here was doing some interesting work on getting ready to start a PhD.
How long did you guys know each other for?
Before that, eight years.
I love the improv, I have.
We knew each other for a bunch of years, and then he was getting ready to start a PhD where he was, the real focus of what he was going to study was about prisoners who work, and prisoners who are wanting to change their conditions and taking strike action, and to try to do something about their conditions. So I interviewed him back in 2013 for this idea that he was yet to explore in a PhD.
Wow.
And we went back and listened to this audio that was recorded all these years ago, and it's basically kind of like this idea of what eventually became this book. Of course, he also had a thesis along the way, and I went to law school. And then what happened was there was in 2018 there was a Canadian prison law conference that happened in Halifax, and some people here were there, and. At that event, I gave a talk about a paper I wrote in law school back in 2017 about kind of the legality around how prisoners could actually unionize. Like, what did the law say about it? How do prisoners overcome these barriers? It's just like a short little paper for law school. And then I gave this talk a year after getting out of law school at this conference. And then I talked to Fazila of Fernwood afterwards, and we just started talking about the idea of a book. And then around this time, Jordan was like getting near the end of his thesis, and lo and behold, we ended up with this.
Wow.
And I just want to turn over to Jordan here to give us some like lowdown and some history of prisoner labor and give us some background.
Yeah, thanks, Asaf, and thanks everybody for coming out tonight. And I also want to say a big thank you to Fazila and Santa and Anu and everybody at Fernwood for making this happen, really, and also thank you to Glitterbeam for having us tonight. So I want to talk about a few things, kind of like the big picture of what prison labor looks like in Canada, and I've kind of organized this around what I think have, as I've been doing research on prison labor, I'm calling this 4 frequently asked questions about prison labor. And then I want to talk a little bit about this idea of a prisoners union and why Asaf and I think it's a good idea, and he's going to kind of take it from there. We hear from Jason. So my 4 questions are: who works? What do prisoners do for work? Why do prisoners work? And who benefits from prison labor? And so who works, just, to give the kind of big picture, in Canada, the majority of sentenced prisoners work, both men and women, in federal and provincial and territorial institutions. But despite the fact that the majority of people work, there are also important issues of unemployment that exist in prison too, and underemployment, people wanting more work, more meaningful work. You've heard a bit about wages, which we can talk a bit more about. But it's also, there are people who are in prison who have not been sentenced on remand, and there's a whole immigrant detention system that people might be familiar with. And we're not really going to be talking about this too much today, but these people, under some circumstances, can volunteer to work in Canadian institutions. You heard a bit about what prisoners do for work from Rachel and Patricia. To say a bit more about it, we can categorize prison labor generally into 2 categories. One, institutional maintenance, all that stuff that has to be done. You heard that prisoners run the prison, so the cooking, the cleaning, clerical work, trades work, all that kind of maintenance upkeep that has to be done in any kind of institution. And then there are prison industries. You heard a bit about this too. So prison industries are set up to produce goods and services which are sold. And there are, currently in Canadian history, there's been a, wide range of things that prison industries have produced. So Ontario license plates are probably like the most tangible, visible prison-produced good in Canada. They're all made in
prison they make those
in
Lindsay,
the
Central
Central East. One marker plant, they call it. And that's through an organization in Ontario called Trillcore, which runs all the Ontario prison industry programs. We also have, agricultural goods. People might have heard about the prison farms in the federal system, furniture, textiles, prefab housing, pre-carpentry programs, and then all sorts of services, all, data entry, commercial laundry, printing, snow removal, all sorts of stuff. And so there's, a massively diverse range of what kind of work prisoners are doing in Canada. You already heard a little bit about some of the criticisms of these prison industry programs around their gendered nature, and this has been a long-standing criticism by not only prisoners and kind of outside critics, but has also been somewhat recognized by the government, at least through the form of the Office of the Correctional Investigator, the federal prison watchdog, who repeatedly criticizes these programs on this basis. I do also want to say there's been a lot of criticism of a particular CORCAN program, the federal prison industry program.
Blankets that, with their fireproof.
Yes, fireproof blankets. One program so CORCAN, as part of the federal corrections, has a mandate to because of the massive inequalities, overrepresentation of people of color and Indigenous people in prisons, has been mandated to come up with culturally appropriate programs. And so one of the things that CORCAN has done is come up with this thing called a Fur and Shirling program, which has Indigenous people produce what it calls traditional handicrafts.
We don't do that in Nova.
No, not in Nova.
Definitely not.
Only out west in one
I
or two
will say
places.
though, that we have quite to get at
Yes.
Nova, and we did start, the inmates were allowed to start selling them only to the staff though.
That is interesting.
They had to put them in a big glass out front, and that's the only time they could sell them. And
Right.
of course, AC had to take the cup though.
Yeah, so
Wow.
Fur Shirling, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
No,
basically it has the criticism is basically this, that Indigenous people from all over, you know, so-called Canada, are go into this program and produce things which are not necessarily related to their own culture or people. So dream catchers, moccasins, whatever, regardless of where they're from. And this has resulted in you know, criticisms that this is a form of kind of cultural exploitation, cultural appropriation, and not actually any kind of meaningful cultural program. So I just wanted to kind of flag that. Now I want to talk a bit about why prisoners work. Once upon a time, people worked in Canada as part of their sentence. So you've all heard of people being sentenced to hard labor, like the movies or something. This is no longer the case. You know, in Canada, the logic is that people work in prison as part of rehabilitation, which is a big, important word that Asaf is going to pick apart a little bit. But you know, according to correctional law and policy, work is not punishment; it is rehabilitation. And so, you know, from you know the position of Asaf and I, prisoners work for two real reasons. One is ideological. Prison labor gives the appearance of something happening in prison that is rehabilitative, even though there's not really any kind of meaningful measures about figuring out what kind of programming and employment actually ends up with people getting jobs outside. And there's more that we can talk about this if people want to. Asaf and I also talk about, you know, work being such a central part of prison. It's in the DNA of the penitentiary system in this country and others, which is that part of the point of penitentiaries was to produce workers for the emerging industrial capitalist factory system. Right around the same time prisons appeared, factories appeared. And you can see it, you know, the people who were advocating for these kinds of institutions said, what we can do, the language that they use is old timer, that said, inure prisoners to the habits of industry, right? Make people be good workers. And this remains still a kind of ideological, you know, justification of prison labor. The other reason is money, which, you know, in order to talk about, I'll move into my next question, which is who benefits from prison labor? And it's important here. I think there's an image when people think about prison labor. I think a lot of times people think of the United States, and you think about like big companies, the controversies around things like companies like Whole Foods or Victoria's Secret utilizing prison labor. This is even, I think, kind of exaggerated in the United States. Like the vast majority, something like 95+% of prisoners
Not
work.
to interrupt you
Yes.
again, but I love it. I love listening to you talk. I would like to know, because of course you guys done your research, in Canadian prisons, especially women or men,
Yes.
how much do they make from us working?
This is like the $1 million question around all of
Because we
this
don't
stuff.
make much,
No.
so you know that we make furniture at Corkham, we make blankets,
Yes.
sewing, all kinds of stuff. So where does that go?
So this is a big mystery, and you know I could try to address it now in two ways, which is to say it is
I'm sorry to interrupt.
no it's good. You know, corrections is like a bit of a black box. Everybody knows it's very secretive. You know, all kind of government institutions like to protect
Right.
themselves and whatnot. When you get into prison industries, there's also a kind of shield that the administrators, people who run these programs are able to put up, which is say that there are trade secrets. And so normal access to information kind of rules don't apply because you can say, well, this is part of our commercial enterprise, and this is basically a trade secret. So it's extremely difficult to answer the question that
Yeah,
you
like
just had.
what's the net worth a year?
But one of the things that we talk about in the book, and Asaf is going to talk about, is something called the real economic benefit.
Yeah.
Which is basically a measure that as participants in employment programming, prisoners make real, meaningful contributions, monetary
Absolutely.
contributions to the correctional system and the institutions that they're in. And they would not be able to function otherwise, and the cost to the
Keep
public
them running.
would be astronomical
Mhm.
if all of the work that I just described had to be done by, you know, employees who are, you know, outside and brought in.
So I don't know if you guys know, but when you get on a suspension and you have to go to a correctional center, CSC has to spend $300 per day for that federal inmate to stay at the correctional center.
Right.
That's insane.
Yes,
Insane.
we're talking big money here.
Insane.
And so I do want to say, so there is some private involvement in Canadian employment programming, but it's like very small potatoes. It's like a fishing lure business in BC that assembles fishing lures. There's like a wrought iron fence company in Calgary. But this is not the majority of the goods and services that I talked about in Canada are produced for what's called state use, meaning it's the government departments, ministries that buy those goods and services, and it's mostly the correctional system itself. So it's like a massive subsidy to itself, and these are like, everybody kind of knows, these are huge budget items, right, corrections? And so when we think about those huge budget items, we also have to think about the way that they're subsidized through the labor that we're talking about.
I think the next book you guys should write is about all the money that's needed.
I would love that. I would love this.
Are you ready to publish
I would love
that
to
one?
write it. So my last question, so is prison labor coerced? And then I want to say a little bit about prison pay. So is prison labor coerced? In short, yes, this is explicit in correctional policy and legislation in many of the provinces where I'm trying to think of the exact term, it's on my page here, that basically work performance, failure to adequately perform work is an institutional offense. So we heard a bit about institutional offenses. This includes like doing your job badly or not up to someone else's standard, right? And as part of punishment for institutional offenses, including for work performance, not showing up at work, that kind of stuff, in some provinces, extra work can be assigned as punishment. So this is like straight up forced labor. In the federal system, it's a little bit more roundabout, but what happens is basically that federal prisoners have correctional plans. And work is a normal part of correctional plans. Once people have basically agreed, and we could talk about how much choice people have in their correctional plan,
Well, you don't
they're bound to it, right? And so there are all sorts of consequences, especially, you know, when people are trying to get early release. About, did you follow your correction plan? How was your work performance? Exactly, all that kind of stuff. But I do want to say, despite the fact that, you know, prison labor in Canada is forced labor, it's coerced, as was mentioned by Rachel, prison labor is also a source of leverage and power. And prisoners have known this for a long time. And the withholding of that labor, striking, has been a way to advance prisoners' rights and causes for as long as prisoners have been working. And this, you know, is part of the logic that we think plays into this idea of a union. There is potentially a lot of power that can be leveraged in trying to create, you know, better conditions and advance kind of broader causes of prison justice, prison abolition, whatever. We heard a bit about pay also from the earlier comments. And yeah, so just to reiterate, in the federal system, the top pay is $6.90 per day, right? Not per hour, subject to the kind of deductions that we heard about. In the provinces and the territories, the pay ranges from nothing to like canteen credits,
Chocolate bars.
to in Quebec, in some prison industries, people make minimum wage minus deductions, which is kind of the highest in the country. Okay, so this leads us to the idea to basically say that
Come from, I love it.
Fredericton, you're Fredericton, a hard time.
Best.
Which is that, you know, Asaf and I both kind of come out of like a labor background. And it's like when there are workers being, you know, having their rights trampled upon, when there are workers who want to fight back, what they do is form unions. And we did not invent this idea. There's a long history of prison unionism. And basically to prison union, when we talk about prison unions, there's kind of two kinds of things that people talk about. One is what we call a political union, which is when prisoners try to get together and negotiate vis-a-vis the prison administration. Basically, we're prisoners, you're the prison administration, we want to negotiate certain things. Then there's also prisoners' labor unions, which are more like the normal labor unions that we think about, that prisoners join as workers and then negotiate with their employers, who most of the time are the prison administrators. But it's still like, it's the difference is kind of important for the reasons that Asaf is going to talk about. And then, so the basic logic of a prisoner's labor union is this, which is people in Canada, workers have rights, and they and people can try to leverage, prisoners can try to leverage their rights as workers as a way to limit the kind of total control that administrators have over their work and lives, push back against that. And so we can see in certain examples, so I'll show you a historical example. The case that we talked about, the most important case in the book, is that in Guelph, in a provincial prison in 1977, Guelph, Ontario, there was an experimental meatpacking operation that successfully unionized with the union called the Canadian Food and Allied Workers. And the union was a majority prisoners. It was a mixed workforce, but majority prisoners. And so what the union was able to win in collective bargaining was equal pay for prisoners and free workers. And really importantly, this is the key thing, expanded rights for prisoners, which may seem modest, but based on what you've kind of already heard, are quite substantial. So for example, the right to hold union office. The administrators had no say, the prison bosses had no say whether someone was a shop steward or the president of the local. And this is a form of like freedom of association, which is normally really clamped down on. They also won the right to attend union meetings in the community, which is a sort of freedom of movement, which is like unheard of in any other example. And then also importantly, won the right to keep their jobs after release, which sounds, if you're trying to run a successful reintegration program, it seems like very obvious that people should get to keep their jobs upon release.
And you might find this shocking, with parity with outside workers, same wages, gone through unionization and negotiating.
And so I'm gonna, I probably talked too long here, but I'll say that there have been other attempts to form unions for Canadian prisoners, and they have thus far failed. There's stuff, I think we can say very subtly, like there's stuff that we have heard of that's ongoing right now. This is going to reemerge. But there's been this major problem, which is the issue that prisoners are not legally categorized as employees.
Yeah.
They are participants in programming, and they are participants in rehabilitation programming. Asaf's going to talk about rehabilitation and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
So just quickly, I hope we do talk about this, but what you just said about the programs is beforehand for the federal system in the 2000s, they changed their model so that they're recognized as a rehabilitation program
Yes.
for that exact reason, so that prisoners cannot organize in part of the program.
Yes.
Yeah, terms are very important, actually. And I think the best starting point for talking about the term rehabilitation is Shawshank Redemption. Has anyone here seen that movie? Probably lots of people have seen that movie.
it.
Now, near the end of the movie, there's that character, Red, who's basically the secondary, or you could call the lead character, depends how you look at it. And Red, at the end, near the end of the movie, he's up before the parole board. He's been through the same rigmarole over and over again. He's being asked, "Are you rehabilitated?" He's tired of this conversation. So he said, "Rehabilitated? That's a bullshit word." That is actually the best definition of rehabilitation. Like, it's in correctional law, that is precisely what rehabilitation amounts to. It is whatever they want it to be. And interestingly enough, you will not find a single definition of rehabilitation anywhere, not in the Criminal Code of Canada, which of course is a source of the sentencing regime for people who are convicted of offenses that involve a jail term are sentenced to prison time. Even the Criminal Code does not define rehabilitation. The Corrections and Conditional Release Act, which is a governing statute for all correctional services in Canada, does not define rehabilitation. The Corrections and Conditional Release Regulations, which are supposed to add in details that are not covered in the Act, in terms of operational procedures and such, does not define rehabilitation. Correctional policy, commissioners' directives, not a single definition of rehabilitation anywhere. So what happens with this? When you have a term that is completely undefined, it becomes weaponized. It becomes weaponized because it means whatever they want it to mean. So they can say, the work you're doing, the program you're doing is rehabilitation because you say it is, because you're doing it. And you're doing it because we tell you have to do it to get out, therefore it's rehabilitation.
Yeah.
It becomes self-serving. So you get the prisoners doing not what they need to do, but what the prison wants them to do. It's beneficial for the prison. So they're making things on the inside. They're running the institutions and saving the government a shitload of money. And they're making things such as furniture that's used in other federal government departments. How much money is the federal government as a whole saving on furniture costs on having prisoners make this stuff for next to nothing? Or making PPE during COVID-19. Who gets to use the PPE that are being made by prisoners?
Not the
Of course,
prisoners.
the government, yeah, not the prisoners, because a lot of times they wouldn't even get a mask if they asked for it. But it's guards, it's other prison staff, it's other government staff that are using what is made by prisoners. They're the ones benefiting. The government is benefiting off of the next to nothing that prisoners getting paid for the terrible conditions that they're getting paid in. And it's called rehabilitation. So I want to go to something in the book here from a prisoner about what he thinks of what's happening on the inside. So Ghassan Salah is a lifer at the Federal Bath Institution in Ontario. And here's what he put together. I met Ghassan through the Canadian Association of Labour Lawyers Conference back in 2021. He was one of the presenters on a panel that I was also part of. And I met him through this and followed up with him on it. And I got some great comments that are in this book now. So he's part of this book now. So what he says is there's something called the Employment and Employability Programs. Part of this is basically part of PORCAN. It's the programming that is supposed to prepare people for getting jobs on the outside. It's like, we're getting you ready for release. Employment and employability programs. Pay attention to terminology. They're not calling it employment, they're calling it programming. But saying employment and employability, getting ready to be employed in the outside programs. So what he says, Salah's criticisms of EEP, which requires that employment programming be assigned to prisoners regardless of need, includes inadequate pay, the absence of meaningful career counseling available to federal prisoners. Most of the jobs assigned to prisoners, the words of Ghassan, do not provide any marketable and transferable job skills, are not useful to the current job market demand, and are not readily linked to formal employment. Relatedly, EEP program does not provide a path to employment through certified vocational training programs or through formal post-secondary education. On the rare occasions when vocational programs are available, they do not reflect the current job market or demand. Finally, prisoners are forced to fend for themselves upon release. The CSC fails to help prisoners released into the community who are still under CSC jurisdiction to find training or employment. In fact, the CSC places the onus on incarcerated prisoners to present valid employment opportunities as part of their release plan before being submitted to parole. Given all this, Salah proposes, since the CSC is very adamant that employment for prisoners in federal correctional institutions is a program and not employment, then the CSC must be held accountable for all its commitment and obligations, beginning with the fact that EEP must provide marketable job skills to be relevant to the current job market. This means that every institutional position for prisoners should lead to some form of formal training, certification by an accredited institution to be useful for the prisoner and be readily linked to formal employment. This also means that any work in an institution that does not have any employment and employability enhancing value should not be part of EEP and should be offered as general employment for minimum wage pay. He's calling them out of their bullshit. He's saying, listen, I'm inside, I'm doing this kind of work, and it's not useful for the outside. He knows what's going on. He knows that it's useful for the prison, not for him, because they're not looking at the outside job market. They don't pay attention. They call it rehabilitation. And then they hope no one's paying attention. And then on the inside, the work being done is useful for the prison. It's useful for the government, but not for the prisoners. We're calling. Yeah, he's calling them to listen. Saying, listen to us. Here's what we're asking for. He's giving clear demands. And these are not just the demands of Ghassan Salah. These are the demands of all prisoners who have the experience of working with programs, as you both commented on. You had that experience. You knew what was missing, but they're not listening to you. The call for doing something about the gendered work in prisons, right? The fact that women prisoners have been doing sewing men's underwear for like male prisoners and other such work that's gendered.
The woman's job.
Exactly. For years, for many years, for decades, this issue has been called out as a problem. The correctional investigator for the last decade, every year in the report says gendered labor, it's a problem, it's got to be dealt with. But it won't be until prisoners unionize. Because through unionization, other workers on the outside.
Well, how do we get there though? Because if we get there, we're gonna get punished.
Yeah.
How do you get there? Who's gonna be our union leader that will hold CSC accountable where we don't get punished for our parole and our early dates and all of that stuff and our correctional plans and our CMT team that lose all that support? How do we get there? Who is gonna be our leader?
That's a good question. So the thing is, prisoners have gone through one particular route recently back in.
Oh, I went rogue.
Yeah.
I went rogue. I did. I was a minimum security inmate and I ended up in that.
Yeah,
I had
okay.
too much influence on the institution.
And that's what they do, right? It's like back in 2011, there's a group of workers out in BC, out in federal custody in BC. There's a particular individual named David Jolivet, who was incarcerated out there and tried to sign up fellow workers on the range. Tried to sign up for union cards with a particular organization they formed called Confederation, which was an independent union that was designed to be a specific union designed by.
What were they
workers.
CFC approved?
No,
No,
they were not.
exactly.
They were an independent organization,
Exactly.
right? So this was a particular one that was tried to set up an independent union. And the effort was made back in 2011 to sign up fellow workers. Of course, they were shut down, not surprisingly. Guards didn't let them sign up.
That's what I promised you, that once I get my clearance in the next few months, I'm gonna change some shit. I promise you, right?
You'll get
I
free.
will. I'm
Yeah.
telling you right now.
Oh, yeah.
This other back of those inmates, when you see me,
We will talk.
We'll definitely talk.
So, in 2011, effort maybe try to sign up other workers in the range. They were shut down, prevented from signing up workers, which of course is an unfair labor practice. Lodged an unfair labor practice complaint, and then this went to something called the Public Service and Labor Relations Board, because the effort was made by workers then.
You probably know Gordon Earthno then.
Sorry,
Gordon Earthno, you probably know him.
no,
They have a handbook in Renew that he created on how to survive prison. He was kind of like a union leader, that being a union leader during the whole prison. And they created this handbook with him and worked with him. He was the first person that was able to get rival gangs to live on the same range together.
that's amazing. And when was this?
So 2002, 2003. I think it's definitely long.
All right, again, we'll talk.
All right.
Yeah, so back then in 2011, effort made to try and sign up workers at the range and shut down by administration, and then they launched an unfair labor practice. It went to something called the Public Service and Labor Relations Board in an effort to try and basically get the labor board to agree that they were prevented from being able to organize, and effectively their unionization effort was unlawfully shut down. But when they went to the Public Service and Labor Relations Board, two things happened. One, the board said, you are, for one, you don't have jurisdiction. They were told, oh, you're not a public service worker, because to be a public service worker, there's a particular process where your jobs have to be created. They officially don't exist, because there's something called a Public Service Commission under the Treasury Board. It's all this federal government infrastructure that decides who's a public service worker and who's not. You're not on the list, you don't exist. They were told you don't exist. Second reason, they were told you are actually you're being rehabilitated. You're not actually involved in employment, because what you're doing is for your own benefit, not for the benefit of the Correctional Service of Canada. So that's what they were told, right? But the
So I
interesting,
keep
yeah,
hearing about the jails that are like, Quebec and West, but what about Atlantic Canada?
Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, like, I keep hearing about the jails, like how it happened up there. What about the ones that are like right on our home, like Renew, Nova, Spring Hill, Wheelchester?
I think that's a story yet to come, perhaps, because there's rumors afoot that
know, I heard it too.
at least as far as like the history, recent history, what happened, the efforts that we know of. Again, there's a lot we don't know about, for sure. There's a lot happens quietly, but
Oh, yeah, no, that's
of course, and we will talk.
keep saying that.
We will talk. You have a lot to tell.
I mean, your book is amazing, and I have to say, like, your book is fantastic. I interrupt you, you're amazing. But I do want to say, how did you get to this point, and how do you, with the labor and everything, what is your vision on to get the union in there? How? Who's gonna be the union representative? Who's gonna work with CSC? Who's gonna be in bed with them? Who's gonna work hand in hand? Who is CSC going to approve? Without us getting, without us getting punished?
Yeah, the reality is, if it's a unionization effort, then CSC, they don't matter, because prisoners, either they have their independent union or they have an established union that they're able to reach on the outside. There are many.
So why
Yeah.
have passion then?
Well, it's one of the things we cover here is that
All right.
it's something that, in order for the effort to actually succeed.
Am I driving? Did she say I'm driving you crazy?
No, you're not.
Thank you. I'm
But-
interacting. I just want to tell you about.
The reality is prisoners will not succeed in their struggle for unionization unless there is actual labor movement support. One of the things that's been missing over the years is a labor movement that champions prisoners' unionization. That will be there for them, that will be, that will actually be a paired body in which they'll form a local. And there's many unions on the outside that are big unions and have resources that could put their effort towards solidarity unionism, which reality is barely any dues would come from prisoners. It's not about dues, it's about
So how,
solidarity.
say me and you, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna be union reps, how do we go do that for the prisoners inside? You and I are gonna be the main people, we're gonna be the union reps for the prisoners inside, how are we gonna do it?
Well, it's like with any union, you have to get all your coworkers involved. And
Or I can get them involved.
exactly, and saying what do they want? What are their demands?
But
And
what
then-
would we have to do though, what are the qualifications that we have to do to be able to be like reps in union?
Well, it's like, have you ever been involved in unions on the outside?
No, but my family all works in union with us, so I'm.
Every union is only as strong as the workers that form the local.
So say I got every female in Nova to be a part of this union, could we be the reps?
If you're voted, if they decided you're the best, if your fellow workers decided they wanted you.
I'm definitely gonna have that, so I think that's my next mission.
Look at that, see, things are happening.
I think that's my next mission. Oh, you know what's up, you know doing that.
Yeah, so you kind of jumped ahead here to,
I'm so
where we're
sorry,
going.
I'm so sorry.
Well, it's-
Bad.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Maybe this is a good, actually.
Jason, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, no, so this is, we got to the point of the broader labor movement, which is why I did, was Jason's here to talk about. And, you know, if people are interested in kind of like some of the nitty gritty, like basically we'll put it to you this way. We think, and we make a case in the book, which maybe you now have to buy. 'cause you
I
don't
am
know the
buying
story.
it, for sure.
But, that there is a viable path. There's a viable path that's politically and legally sound to basically make this happen. But maybe we can talk more about that in Q&A.
Yeah.
I'll keep my remarks very brief. I found it very fortuitous when you asked me, I think Asaf, you asked us to have somebody come speak, and I agreed, because Asaf and Jordan and I all went to school together. And Jordan went on to pursue justice and truth, and Asaf and I became lawyers.
Legal self-deprecation, I
And
like.
so, if there's any disagreement, you know who to trust.
So who's the criminal lawyer and who's not?
Criminal, yeah.
So, first, thank you for the invitation, I really appreciate
Okay.
it. I'm gonna try to be as quick as I can. I was really honored to share the stage with everybody that spoke. It's really incredible. Actually, very impressed. My name is Jason Edwards, I'm the labor employment lawyer, but I'm here speaking today as a representative of the Workers Action Centre. And what we do, we're sort of a way for labor to organize labor to use its resources, not just financial resources, but also people resources to help non-union workers. And so we basically run a sort of a type of clinic where workers who are experiencing difficulties in their employment relationships call, email, contact us. And we have a small team of law students who will meet with workers and solve problems. Generally, we can see with most employment issues as collective problems. That is, if you're experiencing a problem at your workplace, so are your coworkers. And the best way to resolve that problem is probably to get a collective solution on it.
So do you work at all with any prisoners at all, or?
Not that I'm aware of, but I don't know all. I guess if you know at this point.
You have any interest in that?
All I do now after reading this book.
Yeah, right, right.
One of the questions that you raised are answered most. I recommend anybody who has. It's very enlightening, and I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't know. Shocked, like the wages in particular and the consumption. Employees, even though they're creating value, it's just totally absurd and totally embarrassing. I'm gonna make the case, as Jordan said, that the broader labor movement and working people together have a strong interest in supporting prisoners unions, people who are working in prisons forming unions. And there's two reasons for that. In terms of the Workers Action Center's political philosophy, we think your relationship with the capitalist economy is best understood in a particular way, and that is you occupy one of two positions in our economy. You're either an employee or a worker, or you're an employer or an owner. The vast majority of people in our world, we live in our work, large group of people, that's great, over 99% of workers are members of the working class, not members of the ownership class.
Even if they're forced.
Even if they're forced, that's right. And those people's interests are all interrelated and interconnected. So that's the first thing, first important political point is that working people's interests are all interrelated, all working people. And I know there's other intersections that people experience intersecting identity expression exist, but working people together as a class have a shared interest in certain things. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the employment relationship in capitalism, I'm sure most of you know, is a relationship of power asymmetry. And that is that employers, members of the employment class, have a strong, exercise a strong degree of power over workers by virtue of the structure of the system. And so if you're a working person and you lose your job, you can't pay your bills, you can't feed your children, you might not have a place to live. You have a very, very deep intrinsic tie to your employment as a relationship with being paid.
Or you're in prison if you can't
Exactly, yeah, you depend on that money, you rely on that money. The employer, on the other hand, hires someone new. There is a reserve army of labor for the employer to hire. You are more tied to your job and connected to your job than your employer is tied to. And so you experience asymmetry of power vis-a-vis your employer. The only meaningful way to resolve that or to help yourself in that relationship power balance, the only way to mitigate that power balance is to join with your fellow workers. And there's lots of ways you can do that. The most obvious one, is forming a union. There's other ways to do it, but the main thing, the most powerful thing you can do, alleviate or mitigating that relationship power balance is to form a union. The bargain as one against your employer rather than as
What would
dozens.
you suggest then as a prison inmate working, what would you suggest as
I
a?
don't even know, I'm just learning. Like I learned so much from this book. I had no idea.
So you're gonna be our lawyer then, you're gonna have.
Something to
Yeah.
Be nominating.
So there's a lot of historical evidence, that's not gonna go through it, but as the economy, in the economy, as workers gain more power as a collective, as a class against employers, things get better for the vast majority of people. So after the Second World War in North American economy, our economy, American economy, union density increased, strike days increased, union membership increased. Other things got better too, minimum wage went up, right? A lot of health indicators went up, education went up, levels of addiction went down. So all kinds of things that we think of as good things happen when there's greater worker power. When there's more people in unions that are taking collective action, force their employers. and
Yeah,
governments to
maybe
do
in the
that.
public though, but not in the prison.
True,
I
yeah.
see your statistics
And that's a
are not,
problem.
yeah, like, your book is like, definitely, like, I feel that people in power, especially when I like go and speak at Dallas up with Emma, is like, I try to speak to the future lawyers about, you know, you have the power to help and to advocate and to write books and to, as an employment, you know, lawyer to actually help and change the way that prisoners are being treated. They are the somebody's daughter, son, like.
And you talked about the prison fighting back against you and trying to
Absolutely.
collective power.
I-
That's
yeah.
exactly what capital did and members of the ownership class did in the late 70s, early 80s. Everybody knows about Reagan and Thatcher and the deal with how capital engaged in a concerted attack against workers' power.
Yeah,
And the
let's not
biggest
forget
problem
that the senators can go in at any time without any implication with their cameras. And anytime they don't do that, right?
Yeah, no.
But yeah, like, I feel like the prisoners, they do, they take the prison over and it's, it is.
So the consequences of the fight back from capital are what? Massive explosion in income inequality, right?
Yeah,
You have a massive underclass of working people now. The economy has gotten significantly worse because of that attack over the main reason for that is workers have lost power. We have less ability to form unions and meaningfully fight back and remedy power. And so my point today is that labor unions, all working people have an inherent interest in supporting people in prison who work for unions. The
Who
working
has a-
class.
Please support that.
It should be everyone's fire.
Exactly.
Because the working class moves together, and you can't forget little sections of the working class. And that's exactly what I did before I read your book, is I didn't know any of this. And I'd forgotten the section of the working class, and it's important that if you want to move the needle in the war between capital and labor, struggle between capital labor and who's getting more of our economy, you can't forget segments of the working class.
This is why I mentioned putting in stage with statutory release. I don't know if you're familiar with all the dates, like we have April for statutory release on the detail. Have to do 2/3 of your sentence. All the digital equipment will stay into the statutory release and fight against CSC together as a whole. And we're like a union, but without being unionized, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We're always stronger together. The working class is always gonna get more gains out of employers that make a fair or just or reasonable economy if we work together. And we can't leave people out of that. It's not in labor's interest, it's not in working people's interest, certainly not in people working in prison's interest. Speaking for God, it's from labor to cover social justice.
Right.
And that's why.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, so unfortunately, we're running right up against our time. You can't have an event about workers' rights and then make the workers sit in the cafe Stanley. But if we can kind of like informally mingle, if you want to get our contact info, we'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in this stuff. And thanks once again for coming out.
Yeah.